Before I tell you this story, I want you to ask yourself something. What would you do if you had done everything right, worked hard, sacrificed, stayed patient, and then, in a single moment, the ground disappeared beneath your feet? What would you do if crime suddenly didn't feel like a choice made by a bad person, but the only door left in a burning building? Hold that thought. This is the story of Amora Ose. A woman who saved for 10 years. A woman who lost everything in one day. And a woman who made a decision that changed her life forever, but not in the way she expected. Welcome to Stories by the King. If you're new here, subscribe now, because we don't just tell stories. We hold up a mirror. And sometimes, you won't like what you see. Amora Ose was 41 years old and lived in Kumasi, Ghana, in a two-room apartment she rented from a landlord she had known since she was a girl. The apartment smelled of kerosene and boiled plantain. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television every night, and she had fallen asleep to the muffled sound of soap operas for so many years that silence now felt foreign to her. She worked at a fabric shop on Adam Street, the same shop for 17 years. She folded Kent cloth with the precision of a surgeon. She could tell a customer's budget by the way they touched the fabric. She had trained 4 young women who had all long since moved on to better things. Amora stayed. She stayed because of the plan. For 10 years, she had been saving. Not investing in anything flashy. No scheme. No, send me money and I double it, nonsense her cousin kept pushing on WhatsApp. Just a plain savings account at Fidelity Bank, with a small notebook in her kitchen drawer where she recorded every deposit in blue pen. The goal was a shop. Her own shop. On Kijisha Road, near the new market, the one rebuilt after the fire, with proper stores and foot traffic from morning to night. She had even spoken to a man about a lease. He held the spot for her while she saved the last portion of the deposit. Her total savings, 42,600 Ghana cedis. A fortune. Built one small deposit at a time over 10 years. She was 3 months away from signing the lease. Then the call came. It was a Tuesday. She remembered because Tuesday was the day they received new stock at the shop, and she had been unwrapping bolts of fabric when her phone buzzed on the counter. It was her brother, Kofi. Amora. His voice was strange. Tight. Like he was speaking through clenched teeth. What happened? A pause. Long enough to make her stomach drop. It's Mama. Their mother, 68 years old, had collapsed at the morning market. She had been selling tomatoes. She always insisted on selling tomatoes even though her children had begged her to stop for years. She said idleness was the real sickness. She had been selling tomatoes, and she collapsed, and the woman at the next store had screamed, and someone had called an ambulance that took 40 minutes to arrive. By the time Amora reached the hospital, the doctor had already given the diagnosis. Heart failure. Severe. Requiring immediate surgery. The cost, 38,000 Ghana cedis. Up front. The hospital did not negotiate. Amora stood in the hospital corridor and did the arithmetic in her head. 38,000. She had 42,600. She could pay it. She could pay all of it and still have 4,600 left. But 4,600 was not enough for the lease deposit on the Kijisha store. And the man holding the spot had already waited 6 months. He had told her last week, kindly but firmly, that he had another interested party. She sat down on a plastic chair in the corridor. A ceiling fan turned slowly above her. A child across the room was crying softly into her mother's shoulder. Amora thought, if I pay for Mama, I lose the shop. She thought, if I don't pay for Mama, I lose Mama. She called the bank. She transferred the money. She did not cry until she was back at the fabric shop, alone in the stockroom, pressing her forehead against a bolt of blue cloth. The surgery was successful. Her mother came home 3 weeks later, thinner, with a small scar and a list of medications and new dietary restrictions she immediately began ignoring. Amora returned to her notebook. 4,600 cedis. 10 years of work, compressed into a number that could not get her anywhere close to where she had been. The man with the Kejisha store called her and said he was sorry. He gave the list to someone else. Amora started saving again. But something had shifted. She was 41. The market rents were rising. The economy was squeezing. Her salary at the fabric shop had not increased in 3 years, and when she asked her boss, Mr. Darko, about a raise, he looked at her with something between sympathy and dismissal and said business was difficult. She did the new math. If she saved at the same rate, she would reach a viable deposit again in 8 years. She would be 49. She started having trouble sleeping. It was her friend Abina who first said it out loud. They were sitting outside one evening, sharing fried yam from a newspaper cone, and Amora had made the mistake of telling Abina everything. The savings. The surgery. The lost store. The new timeline. Abina listened. Then she said, quietly, "You know Mr. Darko keeps the week's cash in that drawer in his office. I've seen it. He doesn't deposit until Mondays." Amora looked at her. "I'm just saying," Abina said, popping a piece of yam into her mouth. "You've given that man 17 years. Don't say that." "I'm not saying anything." But she had said it. And now the thought lived in Amora's head like a splinter. Small. Unreachable. Irritating at every turn. She told herself she would never. She told herself she was not that kind of person. She told herself a lot of things in the 2 weeks that followed, lying awake at night listening to her neighbor's television through the thin wall, staring at the ceiling, doing math. On a Friday evening, everyone else had gone home. Mr. Darko had stepped out to take a phone call, leaving his office unlocked, the way he always did when he was just stepping into the corridor for a moment. Amora stood at the counter, folding fabric. She looked at the office door. She thought about her mother's hospital bill. She thought about 49 years old and still renting a 2-room apartment. She thought about 17 years of folding other people's cloth. She walked into the office. She opened the drawer. There were 2 envelopes. She took one. She didn't count it. She walked back out, tucked it into her bag, and stood at the counter, folding fabric, by the time Mr. Darko returned from the corridor. Her hands were perfectly steady. She was terrified. The envelope contained 4,200 cedis. She counted it at home with her bedroom door locked, sitting on the floor, back against the bed. It wasn't enough to restart the Kejisha plan. But it was a beginning. A shortcut to a beginning. She told herself it was a loan. She would pay it back slowly. She would find a way. Mr. Darko would never miss it, not really. He was careless with the weekly cash, always had been, everyone knew it. He would assume a miscounting. She deposited the money the next morning. Then she went to work. The guilt arrived not as a dramatic wave but as a constant low hum, the way a refrigerator sounds in a quiet room. She became hyper-aware of Mr. Darko's movements. She noticed when he went into his office. She noticed when he came out. She catalogued every flicker of expression on his face, looking for suspicion. On Monday, when he made his deposit run, she held her breath. He came back and said nothing. She exhaled. The following week was better. The hum of guilt quieted slightly. She began to believe that it was over, resolved, absorbed into the natural disorder of a business run carelessly. Then Mr. Darko hired a bookkeeper. His name was Emmanuel. He was young, 24, with wire-rimmed glasses and a freshly printed accounting certificate framed on his first day. He arrived with a laptop and a quiet, methodical energy that made Amora's chest tighten the moment she met him. Emmanuel began reviewing the past 6 months of records. Amora watched him work from the shop floor. He was precise. He cross-referenced receipts against deposits. He built spreadsheets. He asked Mr. Darko clarifying questions in a polite, professional tone that carried no accusation, but was relentless in its pursuit of accuracy. 3 weeks after his arrival, Emmanuel knocked on Mr. Darko's office door and closed it behind him. Amora folded cloth at the counter and could not hear the conversation, but she could feel it. When Mr. Darko emerged, he stood in the doorway of his office for a moment, looking at the shop floor. His expression was not angry. It was something worse, disappointed, unresolved. He looked at Amara. "Can you come in for a moment?" She sat across the desk from him. Emmanuel was not in the room. It was just the two of them. Mr. Dako placed a printed spreadsheet on the desk and turned it to face her. He pointed to a column. "A date. A discrepancy. Can you help me understand this?" he said. She looked at the number. She looked at the date. She looked at Mr. Dako's face. He was not asking because he didn't know. He was asking because he had known this man for 17 years, and he was giving her the chance to say it herself. The silence in the room was enormous. Amara sat in that chair for what felt like a very long time. She thought about denial. She had the architecture of a denial ready. She could build it quickly, populate it with plausible confusion, point to Emmanuel's inexperience, suggest a counting error from months ago. She was smart enough. She could make it hold for a little while. But Mr. Dako was looking at her the way her father used to look at her when she was a child and had done something wrong. Not with cruelty. With sorrow. And she found she could not construct a lie underneath that gaze. "It was me," she said. She said it quietly. She did not cry. She felt the words leave her body like something that had been lodged there for weeks. Mr. Dako nodded slowly. She told him everything. Her mother's surgery. The savings. The lost store. The new math. The draw. Abina's voice in her head. The Friday evening. Her hands that were perfectly steady. He listened without interrupting. When she was done, the room was quiet again. Outside, through the thin walls, she could hear a car horn on Adam Street. No more city sounds. The world continuing. 17 years, Mr. Dako said finally. Not as a condemnation. As a fact he was sitting with. Yes. He was quiet again. Then, you should have come to me. She looked at him. You should have come and told me what happened. With your mother? With the savings. He looked at the spreadsheet, then back at her. I'm not a rich man, Amara, but I'm not a monster. We could have worked something out. She felt, in that moment, the full weight of what she had done, and it was heavier than she had expected, because the worst part of it was not that she had been caught. It was that he was right. She could have asked. She hadn't asked because she had already decided, somewhere beneath the surface of her own thoughts, that the answer would be no. She had assumed his refusal before she gave him the chance to be generous. She had stolen from him without giving him the chance to be kind. He did not call the police. He dismissed her. That was the word he used, formally, with a typed letter from Emmanuel that documented the discrepancy and her acknowledgement. She would not work at the fabric shop again. The money she had deposited, she returned in full. It took 3 weeks and cleaned out nearly everything she had rebuilt. She received no severance. Of course she didn't. She received something else, though, on her last day. She was gathering her few things from behind the counter, her small mirror, a bottle of hand lotion, a photograph of her mother she'd kept there for years, when Mr. Dako came to stand beside her. He put an envelope on the counter. Don't open it here, he said. She didn't. She opened it on the bus home. Inside was a short letter, handwritten, and a check for 2,000 cedis. The letter said, This is not forgiveness, and it is not what you earned. Consider it what I choose to give. I hope you find a better door next time before you break a window. She folded the letter and held it in her lap for the rest of the bus ride. 8 months later, Amara Ose was working at a different shop. Smaller. Less prestigious. Lower pay. But she had found a small store, not on Kijisha, but near the Bantimo market. A woman named Sister Joyce was retiring and agreed to a lease arrangement that didn't require a large deposit upfront. Payments over time. Trust extended gradually. The store was tiny. It smelled of dust and mildew when she first cleaned it. She repainted it herself on a Sunday, a warm yellow, the color her mother said was the color of patience. She opened on a Thursday morning with 2 folding tables of fabric and a handwritten sign. The first customer was a woman looking for cloth for her daughter's graduation dress. Amora helped her find it. Amora didn't become a cautionary tale. She didn't become a triumph either, not in the grand, tidy way stories are supposed to end. She became something more ordinary and more honest than either of those things. She became a woman who made a terrible choice and lived with the shape it left in her life. She still has her mother's photograph. She moved it from behind the counter of someone else's shop to behind the counter of her own. The notebook is still blue pen. Every deposit recorded. She thinks about Mr. Daco's letter sometimes, before you break a window, and she wonders how many doors she passed without knocking. How many people she assumed would say no before she gave them the chance to say yes. Desperation is real. I want you to understand that. The story was never meant to make you comfortable. It was meant to make you feel the heat of that moment in Mr. Daco's office, the moment when the math of every choice you've ever made catches up to you all at once. What would you have done? I genuinely don't know what I would have done. And I think that's the point. If this story made you think, if it stayed with you even for a moment, subscribe to Stories by the King. We'll be back with another story that won't let you look away. I'll see you there.